I need to actually see what I'm supposed to say. Okay. Okay, I don't know, shall we do it with mic or without, with or without mic? With? With. Is it on? Is it on now? Yes, okay, here we go. So thank you all for coming. It's fantastic turnout and I'm really thrilled. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Meike Ziervogel. I'm the publisher of Peirene Press and also the editor of the Peirene Now series, of which Shatila Stories is part of. And so this evening we're going to, I'm going to first introduce the panelists then we're going to give you a flavor of Shatila, the camp. We're then going to talk about the book, and afterwards we're going to talk about the making of the book. And at the very end, just before you have a chance to ask us lots of fantastic questions, we're going to see actually the authors. Now, we had hoped to do a live Skype session with the authors, who are, of course, all, except one has now made her way to Germany, Berlin, but 8 of them are still in the Shatila camp. But logistics has defeated us on many levels. So instead, they've recorded over the last week little films into their cameras, giving their impression of what it was like for them to write this book. So let me just sit down. So first of all, I should actually also thank Waterstones for providing this space, for the fantastic wine. Then, really importantly, this book would not have existed with many of you, in fact, who supported our Kickstarter. And so thank you so much for that. And then, yes, thank you. Applaud yourselves, please. And then thirdly, I'd like to thank Basma and Zaytuna, who are a Syrian NGO, but Lebanese registered, who basically operate from within refugee camps throughout the Middle East. And we collaborated with them. Otherwise, we wouldn't have found those 9 fantastic writers from the Shatila camp. So to my left here is Suhir Helal. And without Suhir, I couldn't have done that. Suhir and I, in fact, met a long time ago, about 19 years now ago. Suhir is from Syria. And really, I wouldn't have dared to even touch this project without Suhair's help. Nashwa is the reason why you can actually read all of this in English, the translator, who again has done a fantastic job in actually finding the right tone for the English voices. And then here is Paul Romans, and Paul joined Suhir and me on our second trip to Shatila, and he's responsible for all the beautiful pictures in the book and the cover as well. So first of all, let's start with, first of all, who has read the book? Ooh, lovely. Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to we'd like to give you a flavor of Shatila. And so perhaps I should just hand over to Paul, who describes really what it's like. What was it like to arrive in Shatila?
Thank you, Meike. So I'm just going to describe really as honestly as I can what my experience was. I wonder if this is working. So the trip that I made with Meike and Suhir was actually my second trip to Shatila. The first time was to make a short film in support of Besma Zaytuna, which is the NGO that Meike referred to. And on that trip, I had very preconceived ideas about what a refugee camp should look like. So it would be the images that we saw from the jungle in Calais, something kind of thrown together, low-rise, tent, something impermanent. And Shatila's nothing like that. It's, it's been around for decades. And I think it's probably closer to maybe like a Brazilian favela, than what we understand as a refugee camp. So it's really like a densely populated urban slum that's evolved over many decades. And it's kind of got the chaos about it, almost like a sort of North African street market. And in fact, there are parts of the camp that are actually markets, you know, so part of the evolution of the camp is that businesses have developed within it of all sorts, some of them kind of black market businesses. You know, people come in from Beirut, so they get their cars fixed in the camp and that sort of thing. So it's kind of almost like a grey area, very interesting, the way the economics and the sort of social fabric of the place it exists. So that was something that was very unusual, and I didn't expect that. And I think also, you know, in the sense of being like a sort of an urban slum, in our lives, you know, we're used to all of our infrastructure being hidden. You know, so all the electricity, the water, the sewage, all of that stuff. You know, we don't see it, but in Shatila it's all completely visible. So everywhere you look, there are power cables that, you know, supply people with electricity in different buildings, and some of those don't work anymore, they're replaced with new ones, so it's a huge network of, you know, partly functioning electrical equipment, a lot which is very dangerous, kind of open sewers, you know, water tanks everywhere, so everything's kind of visible. And, you know, so I think all of that I didn't really expect, and also it's kind of really an exhausting place to be, and I didn't really expect that. I think, you know, that you could really stand in one place and just become very tired, you know, sorry. You know, just be, I think the dynamic of it is very exhausting. I think I understood, you know, how people, you know, coming into something that just is so sort of organic, so chaotic, you know, there's just a sense that people are kind of exhausted just being there. But despite all of that, you know, I found the people to be incredibly open, they're very welcoming, very resourceful, and I think there's an incredible sense of compassion that I you know, got from being there and sort of being around the people in the camp. I mean, some things are quite unnerving, you know, sort of you know, sort of young guys you know, sort of openly kind of carry guns, and it's not illegal to carry guns in Shatila. It's kind of lawless in a way as well, in the sense that the Lebanese police never go into the camp, and that's something that's talked about in the book. You know, that if anything happens in the camp, then you know, the police, an ambulance will come kind of take someone from the camp. Taxi drivers won't go into the camp either. So it's on many levels a very disorientating place, and it really was nothing like I expected it to be.
So I should perhaps say, so yes, so Shatila was set up in 49 for 3,000 Palestinians. And really, especially over the last 5 years, with all the influx of Syrians, it has now increased to about, well, the estimation is anything between 30,000 to 40,000 inhabitants. And it's, of course, because it's inside the city, it can't grow outward, it just grows in a most precarious way upwards. And I'm now wanting to actually hand over to Suhir. So what was it like for you being a Syrian, and just by pure chance, you came to London 20 years ago, so long before the crisis. But yeah, while you were there, of course, you were very aware that in fact there were people who you knew that could have been you.
It's quite scary sitting at the front. I always sit at the back, but I try to cope with it. I just would like to thank Meike first to give me this opportunity to take part of this project. And the project was very close to my heart. Being in Shatila was very painful for me. If I don't know Shatila as a camp, and I know the history of Shatila, I would have said it could have been anywhere in any poor area in the Middle East or in the region. But because I went there and I know what Shatila is and I know the history, and yet another crisis, and yet more people has been displaced in this place. And these people are not anybody, they are my people. I came from the same place where they came from. Entering Shatila's camp, and you hear, we've been told, don't go on your own. Always have somebody from the camp to walk with you. Seeing children, Syrian children on the road begging, seeing Syrian women on the stairs going to where we set the workshop, waiting for Doctors Without Borders surgery. All this were very painful for me. I could have been them and they could have been me very easily. I felt stressed about it all, and I felt what am I doing here? I'm coming to deliver a creative writing workshop, and those people are suffering. But at the same time, the warmth of the place and the warmth of people changed my perspective a little bit, and I started looking into the positive side of the camp and the positive elements of everyone there. I felt a little bit self-conscious about my position in comparison to their positions. I felt guilty, even though it's not something I did, but I felt guilty because of my position and the luxuries of my position. For me, I was the chaotic aspect of the camp. I used to it. It is kind of everywhere in the Middle East, but Shatila has different smells and different way people look at you, and especially if you are from the West, they have this sarcasm look. Oh, again, Western people here, you're coming to give us hope and go away, you're going back to your normal life. And that's really for me, is very painful, because I kept hearing myself saying, actually, I still have family in Syria, and I could have easily been you. And on our second visit, in the beginning, we were a little bit nervous. I mean, seeing guns on the people, that's kind of normal. Not normal, but I am used to it somehow. But on the second visit, we started walking inside the camp on our own, me and Meike, and seeing people and chatting, and, you know.
Which was much better than being chaperoned.
Yeah. But yeah, Shatila camp has very, very special smell, which I can smell it now. It might be disgusting, but also has the warmth of the people, which I like to say to the audience, and the warmth of the writers who lived there. Some of them being born there because they were Palestinian Lebanese.
So yes, I think that deserves an applause. So here we have, does anyone have the copy of a book actually, so I can really hold this up. So here we have the book now, and you might notice this book actually has no author's name on the cover. It has, however, 9 authors inside. And the reason why we decided not to put an author's name nor any editor's names is because really it is a collaborative novel written by these 9 writers. And that's why we couldn't fit all of them on the cover, and then everyone would have thought that it's just a collection of short stories, but it isn't. So what is this novel really about? Well, on the surface, it's a love story. It's a beautiful yet very simple love story about between a girl, Shasa, who is in her early 20s. She was born into the Shatila camp because her family came to Shatila in 1949. And she basically has studied university. She can't get a job because she's Palestinian, so she can't get a job in Lebanon, despite the fact that she's been born there. And Adam has just arrived with his family from Syria. And of course, like in any small society, newcomers are not welcome, because that camp was fairly okay to live in until the flood of newcomers. And so both of these young people struggle until they both fall in love. And so that's the main story. And around it, we have a number of characters that are very much describing and living the life of Shatila. And I want to now hand over to Nashwa to actually, what was it like for you to try to recreate? Because what we have at best here are these fantastic, strong voices. And this was really our challenge while translating, but then also Suhir's and my challenge while we interweaved the stories. We wanted to preserve those stories, those voices we had to preserve, how to transmit them. And so perhaps, yes, what did strike you when you first read all this material?
Backtrack just slightly to say that when Meike first approached me about this project, she was sort of desperately looking for a translator from the Arabic, and it was quite a fast turnaround because, with Refugee Week, we wanted everything to be out in a timely fashion. I jumped at the chance. I happened to be available, but with life being very busy, it was still going to be quite a struggle. But generally, these kinds of projects really attract me, and I think probably like all of us, we felt like this was some way, even in a tiny, tiny way, that we could somehow contribute to helping in the conflict. All of us using our own expertise and skills. So I jumped at the chance, not quite knowing exactly what I was getting myself into and the sort of the level of the language, which we'll talk about later. But through the process, and I'm very glad I took it on. First of all, I'm very, very glad. I learned a great deal, and I'm very jealous that actually I wasn't part of the earlier process and meeting the writers. But I do hope that one day I would actually get that opportunity as well. But I feel like I met them through their writing, and I'm sure as all of you who have read it and all who are still going to read it will feel the same, that there's something very unique and raw about the stories that they are telling. And for myself, I'm also a journalist as well as a literary translator, and I've been to Lebanon several times, been to Beirut, been to Damascus, pre-conflict, all around the region, and it was a very, very different experience. Hearing their stories to being a journalist, sitting there interviewing them, the way that they would open up in real life is very different. They would be much more guarded. There's a camera there, you're sitting taking notes. They might not be as honest as they want to be. And also they're very aware of these people who are just kind of slipping into their lives, taking something that they want and then slipping out again. And as much empathy as they seem to be giving you at the time, they're never going to ask about you again, and they're going to move on to the next story, etc. But with the creative writing, even though ironically it was actually supposed to be fictionalized, I felt like it was much more truthful and honest than anything I'd ever heard when interviewing them as a journalist. And that's what really struck me. And in fact, actually, later on I found out that a lot of the stories in the book are based on real stories, which is shocking to me, considering that there are stories of domestic violence and child marriage and death. And I mean, obviously, I'm sure everybody knows what happened, who's read it. But some of these stories initially I did balk at because I've also covered a lot of women's stories in the past, and being an Arab woman, sometimes working for broadcasters that deal with the West, there's a little bit of sensationalism that people can unfortunately slip into, and I'm always very wary of trying to avoid that without sounding defensive in any way. But in this case, there was no need, because they were talking about the stories from their own perspective with very sensitive detail and explanation and context that provided for much more educated empathy. So, I just literally had to translate their stories, and their voices carried the rest through.
What struck me for once actually the product, we had finished our work and I was able to take a step back. What I hadn't picked up as we were sort of working on the individual stories with the writers, but only once we've put it all together as a collective novel, is actually the amount of hope that comes through. A few weeks ago there was an article in the Observer reviewing 3 books about refugees, I think 2 non-fiction and 1 translated fiction title. And the article mainly ended on the note saying, yes, all 3 of these books express the hopelessness of the situation. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, that's why Shatila Stories is so unique, because actually it's expressing hope. And perhaps, is that the same? Would you say it's what you picked up on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the hope is by giving those people a chance to speak, to tell their stories. We said we want stories about Shatila, but we gave them the freedom to be creative. And that's very much is about hope, about the future. For them, because it gives them an idea. Oh, I might, I can write, and my stories will be published. That's hope. And also in the story, when you read it, there are a lot of points when, the bad person who turns out to be in the death scene when Shaza dies. This Yusuf, who's a bad person, turns out to be quite good. He has a sense of a humanity in him, and that's a sense of hope for. It's not all the baddies. They can be also some human inside them. The end story is a woman who worked out her way, and she started working, and she started to ask for divorce from her husband, who really was not nice to her in terms of. When you read the story, that's a hope for the future, for for this character to establish herself, in terms of work, finding her way, coming out of the situation she is in, and that's what really stuck in my head. The idea of, those people. They felt very, very inspired by this project, and that for me is really, really a sign of hope for them, and that gives me hope as well.
And I think that comes through in the book, is that they felt inspired, and that inspiration is really what also the book is about. Now, Paul, you saw Suhir and me in action with the writers there, but you had no idea what exactly we were talking about, what's going on, because at that point we were working in Arabic. And then you read the book. Was it what you expected?
No, it wasn't. And, I was absolutely delighted when I read the book. And there's so much texture and so much sort of detail and, kind of beautiful descriptions, that I didn't really know what I expected. And I think one of the great things that, when we first talked about the project, was the idea that really neither of us had specific expectations about what was going to happen. I think that was true of the photography as well, that, one of the great things about photography is that's a fantastic vehicle to learn about people, things in the world. And, that was really what motivated me, with the photography. I didn't quite know what's going to happen with it. And I think with the photography, it was a process of, you kind of immerse yourself in the culture, people open up, you establish a bond of trust, and then it kind of opens out like a flower, in a way. So the pictures present themselves in the way, I guess, the text, presented itself to you. And as well as, making photographs myself, I was also shooting pictures of you interacting with each other. And that was really great to see as well, it was in a really hot kind of claustrophobic little room in Besman Zatuna. And it was just really wonderful to see the way that you interacted, with the writers. And, as you said, it wasn't without difficulties. Logistically, it was difficult for people to physically turn up, to actually participate in the workshops. I think for everyone it was a kind of really big effort, wasn't it? And I think we kind of tapped into something for everyone. That's my perception of it.
Can I just add one thing? I mean, it's interesting what you're saying, but for me, to normalize their life was a hope for me, because we're not going there to deliver aid, food, and money. We're going there to deliver a creative writing workshop which is any civilized society, any normal people can go. If you are interested in writing, you go to a creative writing course, and that for me was very important. We're not treating them as victims, and that's for me a hope in itself. We working with them as a human being. They've been in this situation because of the crisis, but they still human beings, and they are refugees, but they still, they exist without this title as well, and that's what really stuck in my head, and that's what kept me going, regardless all the challenges we had.
I mean, what's really interesting is that the book is struggling, and I'll let you into a secret, is struggling to get press response, press coverage. And to be quite honest, I was quite amazed about that, because I thought, we have actually produced a beautiful piece of literature. We have an interesting story to tell. We're adding something, diversity, all of this. Anyway, but somebody said to me, this is a complicated book. And I said, what? It's a compelling story. And of those of you who've read it, and actually the first reader reactions are all fantastic. They also, it's a beautiful book. It's a compelling read. It made me cry. Ticks all the boxes. And so why is it supposed to be complicated? Well, because so it's not giving us somebody was saying to me, well, it's not giving us the normal refugee picture. And I said, well, what's that? And of course, it's the one, let's say, of the little boy being washed ashore. The children now in the cage. Again, these are images, of course. That's what we in some ways expect when we hear refugees, those extreme images. And it's very easy for us then, of course, to empathize and to feel something. What we have here with Shatila Stories, ultimately, is people like you and me, very normal people, being just put into very, very difficult situations and trying to make it work. And the other aspect is, this what apparently makes it complicated is that, somebody said to me, well, Meike, it's not just about Syrian refugees. It's also about Palestine. And I said, but that is, it's like saying, well, if you write about, if you write a novel about the English, it can only be white English. It just, it's slightly, again, it's to do with our perception of it. But I want to now come to this aspect of, how did we create this book? Do you want to just talk about a bit about our, Suhir and I love talking about this, about the creative writing workshop?
What we did.
Yes, what we did.
I mean, we did fantastic job, that's what I said. With difficulties and with all the challenges, every night we went to our accommodation, we hugged each other and we said, well done, Meike, well done. When we received the first version of writing, samples, we were so scared and very anxious, I must admit, because the level of writing was really poor. And we said, what we're going to do? But we said, we can manage. We arrived there in the camp, 9 o'clock. We are very serious about the project, and she's German and I'm Syrian, but I was more German than her. I was really strict on the point. At 9 o'clock, we were very and nobody turns up. And we looked at each other, where are they? We don't know. Anyway, they started coming, and of course, we were anxious. We sat down in a circle and we introduced ourselves. And I was, my feeling, I was anxious to see people I might know, but I overcome all my anxiety and my feelings, and I just was concentrating on this project because I did believe in it so hard, and I wanted this project to work. But they saw our seriousness, and they picked it up very quickly. And we said, tomorrow, 9 o'clock here. That's it. And the second day, they were before us actually. We arrived because they changed the room of the camp because of course there is no electricity. It's really hot like sauna, and we were sweating. There is no computers or whatsoever. We're working with piece of paper and pen, and they changed the room to get some fans in, and we lost our way there. Thank you. But they were waiting for us, and we started. And we worked hard with them. We transferred what we really want to do to them, and they felt how serious we are. And we were sitting in around, introducing how you write short stories, and you see people opening the door and say, "Can we have Omar to sort out some stuff, or can we have this person to sort?" And I looked at them. No, we're serious here. We're doing a creative writing. We were very serious and very strict about it, and they picked it up. But we were very nice as well. We didn't. We were glad.
That was brilliant. I think that conveyed it all. And and also, I have to say, and the writer, so despite what Suhir says, actually did amazingly. We assume, so let's just put it briefly into context. Here we have creative writing courses running for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and I tell you, from what the material we got eventually, I don't think, I think a lot of students here struggle. They had 3 days. A lot of these writers, the younger ones, the two of the young guys never went back to school after they arrived in Lebanon. They were 15 when they left Syria. Some of them had never read a novel. That was another moment where my heart just absolutely sank. As Suhir says, the writing samples we got, there were some who can't properly write, but that was who we had. And what was absolutely amazing, and they were against so many odds, because again, sometimes, yes, the fact that some of them didn't turn up on time, they couldn't be bothered because timekeeping isn't on, but others had serious reasons, even while we were there in those 3 days. Somebody's niece died, another person's father died back in Syria. There were tragedies all the time happening. And at the same time, we just had to keep on going. And they kept on going. And then delivered. So they had 3 days workshop where we taught them the basics of creative writing. We only said, okay, 2 things. No flight stories, because we knew we would get 1 flight story at least. So no flight stories, and everything has to happen in the Shatila camp. And it has to be fiction. And what is fiction? So we described that, and we worked together. And then they had 6 weeks where we kept in contact via WhatsApp, and they each had to deliver 4,000 words. And basically the deal was, if you do the 3 days plus deliver the 4,000 words after 6 weeks, you will get an advance, so we'll pay you, and you'll get a contract. So if this becomes a Hollywood film, we're all going to be rich. And we will make use of your material. But we were also very clear with the writers that we are going to take their stories and interweave it into a single narrative. So we were as clear as possible about that. So now we have the English version, and we're actually now translating it back, retranslating it into Arabic, using their original material. But of course, a lot has changed. And some of them, some of the voices they used is actually not really comprehensible, even in Arabic. We understood them because, particularly there was one voice we only understood because we actually had to ask the writer when we went back the second time to read the story out, because even Suhir, I got it. And I thought, I don't understand anything. And then luckily Suhir didn't understand it either.
That was because of the computer, actually. Her writing wasn't very, it was very poor, and the Arabic language was really muddled up, and, we struggled to understand. But second time she sent us a sample, the story actually, I picked it up, and it was about 4,000 words, quite a lot. And I tried, and I tried, and I tried. there was no words whatsoever. It's letters together, but no. But we didn't want to tell her over the phone because we were worried about her emotion. We didn't want to upset her. But when we went there, we said, all right, let us sit down and read your story. And she read it completely different. And what happened? The computer, because they don't use computer, they used one computer there. They queued up for it to write their stories. And something happened with the computer, and they just letters joined together without any words or anything. Just simply because of the computer. But she has her stories, and I was like really shocked, like what we take here for granted, like having computer and everyone laptop going to a cafe to write a short story. That's it's completely different.
What Nashwa got from us is so they were basically 4 stories, strong stories, which we thought, okay, we'll have that translated all, and then we'll make use of it. But 5 were really where we, because if you have 9 stories, 9 writers, you have a lot of characters, a lot of plot points. And so we went straight and, killed off a few characters, got rid of a number of plot points. And so what we handed to Nashwa were a lot of extracts. And then you had to do something with it.
Okay, so I said earlier that I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And then I think rather sneakily, Meike sent me 2 of the better stories initially, and then said, I'll send you the rest later. So after I sort of signed the contract and everything. So the first couple of stories, I think they were full stories, full stories, written in relatively good Arabic, but unfortunately, like a lot of Arabic text that we tend to receive, the editing isn't quite complete. There's sometimes a lack of punctuation, which can be very confusing when you're trying to translate. It makes perfect sense to the writer who knows the context behind it, but with the translator, you don't know where a sentence begins and ends and who actually meant what. But, we got through those ones okay. By the end, though, I think we might be talking about the same story. There was one where I was banging my head against the table, the wall and everything. I just had no idea, what the plot line was, who was saying which bit, what the dialogue was. And
you actually made I don't know if it is but your translation wasn't saying exactly, of course, what the there was you changed the character around, and that was brilliant because that gave me the idea. I suddenly thought, that's how I can make this work.
I had to, there was partly guessing. It was partly guessing, and then I also called a friend. As you do, you have to in times like this. And luckily, she was always at the end of WhatsApp, and she's Lebanese, so it was perfect reference. And actually, she came back and said, no, it's mostly right. What you've got is mostly right. But I think maybe it was her suggestion that was one character and that was another. And then the brilliant thing about this project was that Meike said to me from the beginning, you don't need to go back to the writers about this. That's it. It's very, very difficult to contact them again. We've been there. We know them. We've spoken about these stories. We've helped them develop them. So we know everything that you will need to know. And because I'm normally quite cautious with translation, I always want to make sure that the voice is right and the tone and their intention, even though I really should take that liberty actually a bit more. With this one, I could really just, let loose and go for it because I knew that eventually the whole storyline was going to be played with anyway. So that was really sort of liberating, and it meant that actually I could take each story on its own and then kind of try to get into the mind of each writer because, again, they had told me that each personality was very different and they were coming from very different backgrounds, and so I was very aware that I could quite easily homogenize all their voices and perhaps write in my own style, because I had so much liberty. But I still wanted to retain that very individual tone that they had. So I would spend a bit of time just reading a little bit of what they'd written and getting into that kind of frame of mind, trying to imagine myself as the writer of that story, and then writing it as they would write it, and trying to just simply enhance their writing, trying to just improve on the kind of the grammar and the style, but to keep all that natural flavour coming through. What I couldn't envision, and this is where we had some very interesting Skype conversations afterwards with Meike and Suhir, was how it was all going to come together. because they were all so different. You know, they dealt with different topics, but they were all very different voices. I mean, we had some that were relatively high register, written in modern standard Arabic, and then we had this other one that was, you know, very like dripping in sort of colloquial dialect. And how could you marry all of these plot lines and characters together? We had a brainstorming session on Skype. I still couldn't see quite how they were going to do it, but then, you know, when Meike sent back a draft later of the novel as a whole, it felt perfect, you know. And actually, and it was, you hadn't changed that much. You know,
No, this is what I think. Ultimately, you know, actually, what is interesting is that, you know, I was looking through this now, and I was thinking, ultimately, we haven't changed that much. You know, we tweaked, and we tweaked certain things, but it's not like there's, you know, I'm sure that every writer, I mean, what we've done so far is we've sent a very detailed synopsis of what the book is now like. And, you know, I'm confident that every writer could recognize their stuff in there. So yeah, it felt very intense while we were doing it, but the end product feels like almost, what was the fuss about, you know?
well, I love the idea of the flower, actually, the opening up, because that's how it felt. Sometimes you sort of work, and you think about it, and then suddenly it just blossoms, and the story comes to you.
Yeah. So Paul, over to you now, talking about your photography.
Yes. So the first thing I'll say is that, you know, it's a novel with photographs. It's obviously not a photo book, you know, with text. So the way the photographs work in the book was I really relinquished authorship of how the photographs work with the book by giving a set of contact sheets to Meike and Sasha, the designer. And then they picked ones I think they felt would add some context, some visual context. There's certain things we couldn't really do, you know, so I made a lot of portraits that we couldn't, that weren't really viable to use within the book. So within the photography, there are two parts. There's what's in the book, and then there's a kind of photo essay that I sort of created as well. And I think it was, I tried to kind of come at it really by trying to tell the story, you know, through landscape, through portraiture, through still life, and then also to use some more kind of street approaches. The kind of street approaches, the thing is that you can't really work without getting permission. And that was the thing that became very apparent very quickly, that you know, consent and permission were very important. And surprisingly, people were very open to being photographed and actively wanted to participate within the process. And if they didn't, they were quite clear about it, and it was just fine. One thing we did want to try and do was kind of incorporate some of the writer's photography into the book. And I think we were probably trying to cram quite a lot into a short space of time, but it's something that I personally would like to go back to Shatila, you know, for a third trip to kind of make something happen sort of with photography. What we tried to do though was get the writers making photographs with you know, their phones, you know, mobile devices. And then what we wanted to do was kind of quite ambitious, you know, using Instagram, you know, to kind of disseminate some of the pictures, and then we would see which ones might work in the book. For various reasons, there's only one picture in the book that's made by one of the writers, who is a videographer as well. You know, so I think he had done a short course by a German TV company. This is one of the really interesting things about Shatila. There's a lot of companies come and they do workshops. I think sort of Deloitte have been in there and sort of done an accounting course. And I was kind of trying to make a photograph of one of the sort of young guys at a checkpoint within the camp, who had a sort of bullet vest on and a gun. And I was trying to make his portrait, but his commanding officer wouldn't let me. And then he was explaining that a couple of weeks before he had done the accounting course that Deloitte had done. So I was now doing an evening class to become an accountant. So in the evening, learning to be an accountant, by the day, manning a checkpoint, you know. So those kind of discrepancies, very, very interesting things that came up. And I think that would have been wonderful, I think, would it, had we been able to make more use of the writer's photography.
Yes, I think also the challenge was to include them in the book, because there is an Instagram page called Shatila Stories, and you should check it out. It's very interesting, the pictures they take or took in comparison, for example, to the pictures Paul took. Now the issue with putting these into the book was really that the only yeah, that most of them took it, of course, on their phones, except that one, Omar. He had a camera, and therefore the quality, of course, from a phone is not good enough to be put into a book. So again, technology defeated us there. So yeah.
But I think in principle, it's a really great idea, isn't it? And it's something that I will definitely work on in the future. I think to probably go back. I would like to go back and run a photo workshop there and kind of make something out of that. But I think it's just access really, and we got to see the photographs I made were kind of inside the places where they lived. They were quite personal. We got a sense of what it's like to live and work sort of in Shatila, the kind of the economy, the way that people kind of interact with that. I feel that if I go back, then I would probably be able to get those kind of pictures myself. But it's a process, of course.
Yeah. So I just suddenly realized we were supposed to start with a reading, which went straight out of my head right at the beginning. We're about to show you the film of the writers. So the idea is, I just want to see if you're all about to die of heat. If you're not, then I would suggest we do a reading now and then show the film, then have a Q&A, and then finish off with a short reading. So why don't we do that? So Suhir, you start off reading the Arabic. Now this is right from the beginning. And any one of you who speaks Arabic and English will see slight variations from the original text as to the translation.
Okay. Shall I say the name?
No, you just start there.
الدنيا حبلى بالأعاجيب والذكريات والأيام التي تسرق من عمرنا يوما تلو يوم من مكان إلى مكان ومن زمان إلى زمان أحداث تلد أحداث عندما تدور الرقاب محاولة فهم ما يحصل بالمحيط الصخب أصوات تدوي في أذني من كل صوب وعيوني تأخذ تلتقط صورا لحدث أو ربما لعشرات الأحداث أقدام تجري وأخرى تخطو بحذر الناس من جميع الأعمار والسيارات بجميع الألوان والأشكال والسماء ستائرها رمادية والرياح الباردة من كل اتجاه والأشجار تتمايل بسرعة وكأنما عاصفة تجتاحنا أناس كثيرة وقفت بانتظار الباب المغلق كي يدخلوا ويقدموا أوراقهم لعبور الحدود كأنه يوم القيامة المنتظر القلق والخوف عنوان اليوم والوجوه الصفراء خيمت على ألوان البشرة البيضاء والسمراء جحوظ بالعيون والمجهول سيد الموقف حدود تفصلنا عن بلد عشنا فيه وعاش فينا ودعته لأنتقل أنا وعائلتي لمكان أكثر أمنا هذا ما كان يدور في رؤوسنا جميعا أعتقد أن هذا الإحساس خفف من معاناة أفكاري تجاه ما ينتظرني في البلد الجديد وقفت برهة من الزمن كسرت ملل الانتظار أتأمل نفسي بزجاج نافذة السيارة التي نقلتنا من دمشق إلى لبنان رأيت فتاة بعيون سوداء مرهقة ضيق اتساعهما النعس بوجه أسمر ترتدي معطف بلون سماء المنطقة وحذاء شتوي أحمر يغطي الساق لا يليق بالموقف ولا بالمكان
Beautiful, thank you, Suhir. It's lovely to hear it in the Arabic. Chaos everywhere. Thundering sounds rip through my ears. I blink and blink again. I take snapshots with my eyes. Racing feet, dragging feet, old people, young people, cars of different colours, of different shapes, grey sky, swaying trees. Hundreds, thousands are waiting at the closed gate, paperwork in hand, hoping to pass through. They want to cross the border. A scene worthy of the day of reckoning. Worry and fear are paramount. A pallor has settled across everyone's face, no matter how dark or fair their complexion. Desperate eyes. I bid farewell to the country that I have lived in since my very first day. We are leaving for a safer place. We are on our way from Damascus to Beirut. The confusion around me helps to dispel anxious thoughts about the future. I distract myself by contemplating my reflection in the car window. The mirror image shows a young woman with large, tired eyes. She wears a brown scarf and a brown coat. My gaze travels down to her feet. The red winter boots look out of place, considering the circumstances. And so our journey begins. First to the Helal border region, an agricultural area surrounded by mountains, with the River Asi running through it. Afterwards, all I will remember is the small white car we leave in and how we have to squeeze into the back seats, sitting on our hands because there is no room for our arms. I'm next to my younger brother, Adam. Next to Adam sit our parents. Marwan, my husband, is in the passenger seat, beside the driver, who tries to deal with his fear by cracking jokes that no one pays any attention to. He has a black beard, wears glasses, and uses a white rag to wipe the windscreen, which is fogging up from our breath. Eventually, I can free my hands and I drape Marwan's black jacket around me, hoping it will form a barrier between my ears and the pounding of my heart. Scenes of shooting and shouting and panic and fear and blood flicker through my mind, like watching an old television set connected to a faulty aerial. Yet I manage to fall asleep, and as I drift off, I suddenly feel pleased that I'm able to do just that, close my eyes and succumb to oblivion. But soon I'm stirred again by the sound of a frightened dog. Every now and then I hear the melodic call of a cricket trying to attract a mate. Then once more the night wraps me up in a black blanket.
Well, thank you. And now let's hear the authors. So we need to move. Yeah. No. Do you want to answer?
Yeah. No, we used all the stories from every writer, but we took some aspects of the story because there were a lot of characters and we couldn't use all the characters. Yeah, but all the stories, all the voices are there. What we concentrated on is we knew, like from working with the writers, we knew what they wanted to reach and what they want to convey, and we concentrated the voice. We concentrated on that, but all the stories are in this novel. But we took what the most important things for the character, for the writers to convey, and we worked on that. Is that?
Yep. I have nothing to add.
How did the people choose, or how did the people know about the creative writing workshops that you were running? And how did they decide for themselves, if they had never been on a creative writing course, to go on the course?
So, yes, as I said before, I approached initially at the very, very beginning, before anything else, I approached Basma and Zaytuna, the NGO, and because they run a culture centre in Shatila. So they put out the word, and then they ran I taught another unsung hero of this collaborative work. I taught somebody over Skype how to give a 3-hour creative writing workshop to those 20 people who had shown interest. It has to be said, I think most of them participated also because from the beginning we said we will pay if they deliver. So, there was a financial incentive as well. Having said that, and then from those 20 writing samples, Suhir and I chose 10, and then eventually another one dropped out, so we had 9 writers. And but you can hear, some of them, especially of the younger ones, they were waiting for something like this, and you can tell in their stories. They were able, even though they've never. I remember with Omar, he delivered part of the Adam story, but in his story it was sort of the beginning of his story, and then the story itself went way overboard somewhere, just lost its trail. And so when we went back the second time, we tried to tell him, well, actually you have the end here. We need to know what happened before to these characters. And so, we talked and talked and talked, and about an hour later he said, you mean this is the end? So I just have, and this is of course what if you do creative writing, you know these techniques, but if you've never done it before, you have to learn them. So, yeah.
I mean, the organization run courses, and because there are a lot of things going on in the camp, and some of them worked with this organization, there were interest. I mean, some people like Nibal, one of the writers, she wants to write, and those too young who is behind bars, trying to be artist in his images, they want to write, there was interest there. And the money came as well, but also I think there is interest. And we had 20 samples, and we had to, we chose, can I say that?
Yeah, you can.
We chose the worst of
The least
the
worst.
least worst,
Least bad.
because
Yeah.
it was very difficult to pick, because we want to run the workshop.
I just wondered what happens to the writers now, and whether there's any way that the people you taught can then keep facilitating creative writing workshops for people that are there, so that it doesn't just stop now with the project, and I don't know whether they can continue using the skills you taught them with others.
I mean, we have contact with them all the time, and we build a quite nice relationship. And some of them saying, I'm writing now, and they want another workshop to run there. If we can get support from here, we might run another one. But I would say the organization would, maybe do something else in the future. But the idea of some of them start writing and they want to carry on, that's quite big achievement.
I mean, I heard back from about 2/3 of them, and they've all said that they're carrying on writing.
And they are all with us, by the way, in spirit. We got, we got messages from them earlier on saying congratulations. I mean, Suhir and I will go back. So what we're just waiting now for the Arab version to come, and then when we have the Arab book, which hopefully is later on. I mean, it will be later on in the year. Then we'll go back to Shatila and have a big launch in Beirut. So that's still to come.
It's a wonderful story. Do you have any contact with documentary filmmakers?
No.
Should you have?
Yeah, send them our way, please. I mean, Suhir and I, this is not the end of our story, of our adventure. I mean, our next project is that we would like to run something like this. We want to go back to Syria, so I'm just applying for a visa to go to Syria. And for both of us to go to Syria, because Suhir doesn't need a visa. And so to collaborate again there with an NGO, find a similar group of people, so ideally young, between 20 to 35, but who have stayed, and then do a collective novel with them. So if you have any documentary filmmakers in mind.
Yes.
Good.
I was attracted to the book because I'm passionate about Palestine. But you said that actually quite a lot of the influence in this book is from the Syrian side, the recent refugees, as it were. How does that work, the recent refugees with the established refugees? How much of that has been drawn into the stories that you have produced?
I mean, I don't know if you read the book, but between Adam and Munif, the two characters in the school, the fight between both of them, that's how it describes exactly what is happening now in the camp. Because, after the Syrian crisis, so many people fled there. And one of the writers, said, actually, the camp has changed a lot. And I immediately said, because of the Syrian crisis. And she said immediately, not because of them, but of course it has changed. I've been born here, and now I want to leave because details in the camp has changed. And that's quite upsetting because what's happening is also in an economic way. Most of the people there, they're renting their houses to Syrian, and they go out to rent somewhere cheaper. But what's interesting is conflicts between the two refugees, and some of them are Syrian Palestinian and the Lebanese Palestinian, and that's what the conflict inside the book between between Adam and the boy. But that's what is interesting, because those people cannot face the bigger picture. They cannot face the Lebanese government, the international community, but they can be discriminating the people in the same level as them. And that is the point. Did I answer your
Yes,
question?
absolutely. Yes.
Yes, wonderful.
Why a collected novel rather than a series of short stories? What is it about the situation that lends itself to that form?
So if I answer with my publisher's hat on, short stories don't sell. So, and I mean, for me, this was very much, it is to do with the this idea of that. I really think any creative process, so even if I sit and write my novel, I don't actually write it on my own. But the end product is you know, a lot of people have their say, so to speak, in it. And it's always the idea you have at the beginning and what comes out are two very different beasts. And so this idea I had was to pool our imaginations with the writer's imagination. And really only by then pooling it all together, the end result is something very different. I mean, I come back to this idea of that for me, this is a novel about hope. Now, when we worked on these individual stories and when we saw all the individual stories, that's not what came through for me. It was only once we put it all together and took a step back that I thought that's actually what the book is about. But I didn't know that at the beginning. And I don't think, for example, that would have come through. And it would have also been, you know, just also from a quality point of view. So I knew that what I want to publish as a publisher is good literature. I don't want to publish a, oh, poor refugee can also write sort of writing exercise kind of book. And by saying from the beginning that this is going to be a collaborative novel, in some ways I gave Suhir and myself freedoms to actually guarantee a certain amount of quality. Is that, yeah?
Short stories don't sell. Why did you call it Shatila Stories?
Well, we had a discussion actually. I remember us three in a taxi in Beirut.
Alliterative, wasn't it? I think that's what we liked about it.
Yes, alliteration, Shatila Stories. Yeah, and it made sense. I mean, we decided we needed Shatila in the title, again, as a selling point. And yes, okay, stories I can see, but it's the alliteration. Shatila Stories is just beautiful. It just, you know, we couldn't come up with anything better, basically.
But it is many stories, isn't it? It's all
There's many
interwoven,
stories
and they're all speaking from their own voice and their own characters.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so we have one last little bit of reading. We'll just dive into it without explanation. This is actually, I think, Shasa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Shata's story. Yeah.
So it's the young girl who's in love with Adam. Okay.
I tell Auntie Fatin that I have decided to look for a job. But you've been looking for a job for months now, she sneers, ever since you graduated with your media degree, and they turn you down each time because of your nationality. We both sit silently after that, but inside I'm raging. In this country, the subject of my nationality has always made me feel like a pariah, or as though I'm being punished for something. But no matter what, my pride remains intact. I have even applied for a scholarship to continue my studies at a Canadian university, but I would never utter a word about that to Auntie Fatin. Now I repay her pessimistic glance with a bright smile. I'm not going to look for media jobs this time. I'm willing to do anything. Our reality is such that when we are young, we are taught to be ambitious, study, go to university, and follow our dreams professionally. Then, after we graduate, we discover that we will only be hired for a job that suits our nationality. I drift to my bedroom, lost in a haze of despair. Something my mother used to always tell me when I was feeling particularly down about our camp wafts through my mind. Think of this dump as a work of art, and you'll soon learn to appreciate it. For after destruction comes restoration, and after this refuge there will be a country for us again. After this camp there will be a city named Haifa. I am still in awe of this great woman whose words constantly echo in my ears. Recalling them, I wander along the camp's alleyways, feeling secure as I create infinite paintings of the future in my mind. Even during my lowest moments, I remember her smile, which faded and now lies beneath the dust. Remembering her bright face fills me with hope. Her body embraces the earth and her soul the sky, and between the earth and the sky is a daughter trying desperately to follow in her footsteps.
قلت لها أني قررت أن أبحث عن عمل. ابتسمت لي ابتسامة متشائمة قائلة: بعد عام من تخرجك من كلية الهندسة وأنت تبحثين عن عمل هنا وهناك، وفي كل مرة يتم رفضك بسبب جنسيتك. ساد الصمت قليلا، لكن داخلي فوضى تشوشني. جنسيتي في هذا البلد تشعرني أني مذنبة أو شبه إنسان، لكن تبقى فخري في كل حين. بادرتها بابتسامة متفائلة: سأبحث عن عمل غير الهندسة. أن تكون إنسان هنا عليك منذ الصغر أن تحلم بمهنة ما، ثم تنضج فتكتشف أن عليك دخول الجامعة ودراسة اختصاص يليق بوضعك الاقتصادي، ثم تتخرج فتكتشف أنك ستعمل بمهنة تليق مع جنسيتك. ذهبت إلى السرير حاضنة الآمال في غد أفضل. تلاحقني كلمات أمي التي كانت دائما تقول لي بعدما أعلق خيباتي على شوارعنا ومخيمنا: اجعلي من هذا الخراب لوحة فنية واستمتعي بها، فإن بعد الخراب عمار، وإن بعد اللجوء وطن، وإن بعد هذا المخيم مدينة تسمى حيفا. عظيمة هذه الامرأة التي جعلت من كلماتها حلقا أضعه في أذني. أرتديه وأسير به في أزقة المخيم بأمان، راسمة لوحات فنية تكاد لا تعد ولا تحصى. وحتى في أتعس اللحظات أتذكر ابتسامتها التي تلاشت تحت التراب وأخذ من خديها الأمل. جسدها يعانق التراب وروحها تعانق السماء، وما بين التراب والسماء ابنة تسير على خطاها.
Thank you. So thank you all for coming. It was fantastic. Thank you, the fantastic writers. Thank you, a brilliant team. And do remember, 50 pence of every book we sell goes to Basma and Zaytuna. That means for all Peirene books. We have more than just Shatila Stories. So all the books we're selling this year, 50p goes to Basma and Zaytuna. Plus, if we manage to make a profit with this book, which all depends on how many copies we sell, then that will go to Basma and Zaytuna too. Thank you.